everybody, and welcome back to the Roxy Horror Picture Show. Today we are going to talk about the last manhunt in Ireland. His name was Michael Manning and his poor victim was called Katie Cooper. So first of all, I'll talk a little bit about Katie Cooper, the victim. She was born in 1889 in Collimer in the west of Ireland. She was one of 4 girls and 5 boys. Now, at a young age, she witnessed her sister Helena die of consumption, and that would give her the urge to become a nurse. And that would make her leave County Clare and bring her to Kidderminster in London in the 1920s and 30s. That is where she first started to become a nurse. Now, in the 20s and 30s, it was the aftermath of the World War I, so she witnessed quite a lot of horrific injuries in the young and the old. She was known to have been quite a firm but a very, very friendly and compassionate nurse, which means she was much loved around, the surrounding nurses and all the patients did love her. They said that she had such a nice quality to her and she was very sincere. Now, when she was there, she ended up becoming a matron. And then in the 1930s, she ended up leaving Kidderminster and coming back to Ireland, where she was stationed in Limerick as a matron. The reason why she left England is because England was getting ready to prepare themselves for war with Germany at the time. She was a matron at Barrington Hospital in Limerick. Although she never married, she did have quite a wide circle of friends and a very extended family in Collimer. And like I said, she was a well-loved woman. Katie was also a keen photographer. She took quite a lot of photos in the 1920s, 30s and 40s, and she often made scrapbooks out of her photos. Now, they were all different type of scrapbooks. She took a lot of photos while she'd always holiday in the west of Ireland, hill walking, horse riding. She took quite a lot of photos of her colleagues, her family and her friends. Also in the scrapbook, she'd also write a few jokes, and she'd take a lot of hints and stuff from newspapers and put them in also. And she'd also write a few deep, meaningful sayings that she always thought very fond of and she liked to look back on whenever she felt down. And unfortunately, the night of Friday the 18th of November in 1953 would be her last day on this earth. Michael Manning, a young 25-year-old man with a young wife of the age of 22 who was heavily pregnant, was working that day in Limerick docks. He often worked there for a mere 25 shillings a day, which was needed money for his wife that was due to have a baby. Now, he'd also work as a cartman every now and again to earn a few quid. But that day, he left work, he got home to a small 2-bedroom, 1-storey apartment where his wife had prepared dinner at 2:30 that day. He stayed there till 3:30 and he left again. He had to go to the local market to collect some cement and lime for his father. So he grabbed the horse and cart and carted on into town. When he went there, he thought he had sufficient time, so he went into the local pub and he had 2 pints of stout. And it was there that he met his friend Michael Flaherty. Now, after that, them 2 pints, they decided to leave and go to another pub. They had their 2 pints there. They left and went to another pub. But unfortunately, they weren't served due to the fact that they were quite intoxicated already. But his friend Michael Flaherty, knew of a barman in another pub that would definitely serve them. Sure, we all have those friends, or even ourselves, that would know a barman that would serve you no matter what state you're in. So obviously they're going to go. They went there and had 1 more pint. Now, Manning was quite a small man. He was only 5'3", but he was quite stocky and very, very strong, and it didn't take much to get him drunk. So when they left, he decided that he'd give his friend a lift into the corner close to his house. He dropped him off and he made his merry way to his father's house. Now, when he arrived to his father's house to drop off the cement and lime, his father decided to stop and talk to him for a while and talk about job prospects and what he's going to do and how long will he be lasting in the docks and what would he be doing for money after. He asked him would he like to have a cup of tea, and Michael declined. He says, no, I need to leave. I need to go home. It was around 8 o'clock at this stage, and he decided to cart his way back in, and he went and stopped at another local pub and had another pint and a half. Like it says, he was quite intoxicated as it was, so he was only topping up. He had to drop off the horse and cart in a local field where he always dropped it off. And as he done that, he left, and only a few hundred yards away was Katie Cooper walking back to work. He spotted her. He walked up behind her. He grabbed her, pulled her to the ground, and they ended up in a verge at the side in the grass. She started screaming. As she was screaming, he was shoving grass into her mouth quite violently. He punched her in the face also, which broke her nose and caused quite a lot of blood. The more she was screaming, the more he was very, very violent and shoving grass down her mouth. He ended up knocking 5 teeth from her jaw, which one of them she swallowed. He tried to rape her, but she fought off. The post-mortem, concluded that even though she had severe bad bruising in her inner thighs, she was not raped. Thank God. While Manning was attacking Cooper, there was a young couple walking by the name of John and Anne McCormack. At first glance, they thought they were just a courting couple fooling around in the grass. They paid no heed. But Anne swore that she heard some distressing sounds from Cooper, and it played on her mind. So when they got home after their walk, she asked John, would you mind driving back just to check? And as they're driving through, they seen the attack. Now, as they got closer, it spooked Manning and it made him run off. He jumped over the wall and he ran to his brother's that was close by. Now, as he went to his brother's, he went over and he asked if he could borrow the bicycle, which he always did to use cycling in and to from the house to the horse and cart. He didn't act any different. He certainly didn't act like he was after, not knowing at the time, murdering a woman. He acted quite normal, and his brother thought nothing of it, and he lent him the bike for him to cycle home. As that was going on, Anne and John alerted the guards, explained to them what they saw, and the guards wasn't long coming back up. Now, when the guards got there, they went over to Katie and they seen that she was deceased, that she was dead. Now, when Anne and John went there first, they noticed these 2 distinctive hats, a yellow beret which belonged to Katie Cooper, and a very distinctive brown leather cowboy hat, which had quite distinctive features on it. But they noticed the 2 hats were gone. Not far down the road, as the policeman was coming up towards the scene, he noticed these 2 young lads, and they were wearing these very distinctive hats. Now, he knew one of the lads, Tobin, and they went to the house and he gave them the hats. Now, as they were looking at the cowboy hat in particular, like I said, it was very, very distinctive. They noticed that hat is only ever seen on one man's head, Michael Manning, and that's when they knew that he was a suspect and to go check him out and go to the house. It was midnight before Michael Manning got back to his own house, and his wife had prepared supper. They ate together. She questioned nothing about him, even though his jacket was covered in mud and also had very visible bloodstains, and also his boots. She never said anything, and they went to bed. By 2:30 in the morning, there was a knock at the door, and it was a load of guards. They came in. I think there was 5 altogether. The wife opened the door. They came in and they went straight into, they asked where Michael was. She stated that he was in bed. They told her to stay in the kitchen. Now, this was a very, very small apartment. I mean, there was literally just a partition wall between the kitchen and the bedroom. So the guards went straight into the bedroom. Michael was asleep. He eased up onto his shoulders, or onto his elbows, and he looks them straight in the eye and he says, "Is she dead?" He also said, "I would tell you one thing, and one thing only. Drink was the cause. Always blame the drink. He started scattering along on his bed and he was looking for his fags and he couldn't find one. The guards were asking, what are you looking for? And he says, a cigarette. One of the guards leaned over and gave him a cigarette. Another guard sat on the bedside and he pulled out his notebook and pen and he says, what happened? Michael took a few deep breaths and he says, I will tell you everything. Now, as he was doing this was a very, very small room. He was in an intimidated situation. There was 4 guards at the end of the bed, one sitting beside him. He knew he had to confess all. 70 minutes after it took 70 minutes, for him to confess everything that happened. Now, I have a little bit of a statement here, and this is what he said. I walked along behind her for a few minutes. I suddenly lost control of myself and jumped on her because I saw her all alone. I pulled her into the grass. She struggled. She let out a few screams. I knocked her down on the grass and stuffed grass into her mouth to keep her and to stop her from roaring. I tried to get at her, but I couldn't. I had one hand in her mouth and the other under her back. She got quiet, and after about 5 minutes she began to struggle again. And she asked me to stop. She said, please, just stop. The next thing I know, a motor car with lights on stopped beside me. I got up and I jumped over the ditch. Now, the scene of Katie's body when the guards got there wasn't a pretty sight. She was laying there with her head to the side, blood spurting out of her mouth. She had a yellow scarf wrapped around her neck tightly, also blood-stained and muddied. Her skirt that she was wearing was up over her chest. Her coat was all ripped. It wasn't a pretty sight. And the sad thing is, while all this was happening to her, the nurses in the hospital were wondering, why is she late turning up to work? Now, her next of kin would have been her brother, who lived in Collimer. So the guards had to go that early that morning when they found her body. They had to go and alert the brother and ask him to come to Limerick to identify her body. He had young sons and daughters, and one of his sons, Pierce, remembers his aunt quite fondly. He was only 7 when she died, but what the little memory that he has of her was that she was a lovely, kind woman. Always when she visited, she brought sweets, she brought little toys, she showed them her camera, how it worked, took lots of photos. And after she died, the trunk arrived to their family home, and in it, of course, was all the family photos. Pierce once said in an interview once, our father was the youngest of 10, but it fell to him to identify Katie. They knew Katie was from Collimer, so this is where they came to find the next of kin. The Gardaí in Kilrush had been alerted, and 2 Gardaí had to travel up the hill to find Percy Cooper. They arrived up on their bikes. I remember our father left Collimer for Limerick in the early hours of the morning. Just hours after the murder, I remember him dressing himself to make the journey, and I remember sometime later Aunt Katie's bicycle being brought to the family home in Collimer. Our father never really spoke about the murder in the years afterwards or what he had to go through that night. To be honest, I wouldn't say it was something he'd ever want to talk about again. I mean, I don't know if any of you out there has ever had to identify a family member. It is not a nice thing, and it does play on your mind. Garda Maurice Jones was one of the ones that also went to Michael Manning's house that night, or the early hours of the morning, and he has memories himself, and this is what he says. He goes, it was his wife who opened the door to us. The house is small, just a border partition between the kitchen and the bedroom. Manning was asleep when we arrived. I saw a grey tweed overcoat in the kitchen. It was wet and muddied and blood-stained. Near the fireplace there was a pair of gents' boots with mud and grass stuck to them, also blood-stained. I remember Manning being in a kind of a stupor after waking up. There was a mug of cold tea on the small table beside the bed, and when he was asked about the incident out in Newcastle, Limerick, I remember he propelled himself up by his elbows and asked, "Is she dead?" Now, obviously, when the guards went in, they did notice the coat and the boots, that they were muddied and bloodstained, and they did take it. So even without his confession, they had evidence there. Now, with Manning's confession just done and Dawn only a few hours away, he was going to be arrested and charged for the murder of Katie Cooper, with his young wife anxiously waiting in the next room, wondering what all this was about. After the confession was done, Manning turned round to the sergeant and says, "Will I have to come now with you?" Now, on the evening of Wednesday, the 17th of February 1954, Michael Manning was found guilty for the murder of Katie Cooper by an all-male jury. It only took them 3 hours to deliberate and come up with that conclusion. Now, the judge agreed with the verdict. The only issue the jury had is to find out whether it was murder or manslaughter. Was it done out of insanity, considering that Michael never had any issues with the law? He never ever got in trouble. He was a hard-working man. As far as everybody knew, he was a kind and considerate man too. So it was completely out of character on what he'd done. So the jury had to decide what was the right punishment for this man. And unfortunately, it was murder he was charged with. Now, there's a scripture here from the Justice Monaghan. He was the judge at the time. He then donned a black cap and he pronounced the sentence. This was the sentence. "It is ordered and adjudged that you, Michael Manning, be taken from the bar of the court where you now stand to prison, whence you last came, and that on Wednesday the 10th of March in the year of our Lord 1954 you be taken to the common place of execution, in the prison in which you shall be then confined, and that you be then there hanged by the neck until you be dead, and that your body be buried within the walls of the prison in which the aforesaid judge of death shall be executed on you." He was sent to be hung, lads. Maurice Jones, the guard that was there that night that arrested him, was at that 3-day trial. Every day he travelled from Limerick to Dublin. And he remembers the whole trial. And this is what he had to say. "I remember when Judge Monaghan handed down the sentence, complete with the black cap, and that had been ceremonially handed to him by the court crier. Manning took it bravely. He stood firmly to attention, clasping the railing of the dock with both hands. I got to know him well during the course of the trial, and after the sentence he was handed down, he said to me, 'I was expecting that. I deserve it. I've often passed by the scene of the murder, and I think about Nurse Cooper, and I think about Michael Manning, and I do stop and I say a little prayer.'" Now, after that sentence was handed to him, a week after, there was another murder by another man. This 39-year-old man murdered his wife of 22. He sliced her throat, and the reason why he done it is because she was having an affair. Now, she was having an affair before, she was with a man before they got married, and she was continuing this affair afterwards. Now, even though he slit her throat, he admitted that he done it. He only got charged with manslaughter because she was having an affair. This man, stone cold sober, in his right mind, knew what he was doing, and he only got manslaughter. So obviously, when it came to Manning's case and the verdict, it caused such an uproar. Everybody couldn't believe it. He got found guilty of murder, yes. Give him life in prison. Don't hang the man, especially since he had no previous. Despite the sentence being handed down by the criminal circuit court, he was not hanged on the 10th of March due to the fact that he handed in an appeal. And a lot of it was the circumstances around his confession the way it was conducted by the Gardaí in his room. His barristers argued that the jury should not have taken his confession into account due to the way it was conducted in his bed with 4 guards surrounding him, being quite intimidated, and also the state that he was in, that he was not sound of mind. The fact that he knew what he'd done, he confessed to everything that he'd done, and he asked them afterwards, does that mean I have to come with you now? No one in their right mind would, they'd know they'd have to go with them. And also there was a big issue of mental health at play. His uncle and his granduncle both died in mental institutions, and his cousin was also in a mental institution at the time, so they weren't sure whether he was at sound mind. There was a petition going around as well, and in an incredible act of compassion, Katie Cooper's brothers and sister all signed the petition for him not to be hanged, that he should serve life and not be hanged. It's quite a sad, well, a weird fact that the last man to be hung in Ireland had a petition going around signed by the victim's family. This is what the victim's family had to say. My family didn't hate Manning for what he did. They learned that he wasn't a full shilling and that he used to drink a lot. They were willing to allow the sentence of death to be commuted. I think the correct sentence for Michael Manning should have been imprisonment for life, not hanging. When my father signed a petition for Manning not to be hanged, he would have considered the fact that Manning wasn't of sound of mind and that he drank too much. I believe the correct sentence should have been life, but life with no parole. On Friday, the 3rd of April 1954, unfortunately Manning's appeal was rejected by the Circuit Criminal Court, and a new date was set for his death for the 20th of April 1954. Michael was sent to the same room as he was in, D block, and he was there until the bitter end. That was the cell where people were basically held until death. That cell has never been used since. Now, he did write a statement to the court, trying it one last time to basically tell them how he felt. I have it here. It's quite hard. I am almost 7 weeks under the death sentence, and it is a hard sentence, to be fair, for such a long time. It seems no matter what I do, the punishment will have to be carried out, so this is my last chance, and I ask you to show mercy. As I was passing out the woman that night, I suddenly lost my head and jumped on the woman, and remembered no more until the lights of the car shone on me. I was never in trouble in my life before that day. I am married 18 months, and my wife is expecting a baby within the next fortnight. And it is hard, strain, worrying how I'm going to get on. We were always happy until this trouble happened. My wife says she'll never hold anything against me, no matter how long we will be apart. I am truly and heartfully sorry for having committed such an offence against God and the law of man. I have asked God to have mercy on me on account of my wife and my parents. My wife is only 22 years of age and I am 25 years of age. So now I send in this petition, I ask you to show mercy upon me, as it is so near to Easter and Good Friday. I am not afraid to die, as I am fully prepared to go before my God, but it is on behalf of my wife, as she is so young and so near the birth of the baby. So I would be grateful to you if you showed your mercy toward my wife and me. I remain your humble servant, Michael Manning. The government also considered pleas made by the members of the public. One person appealed directly to the Taoiseach, considering that the hanging was due the Tuesday of Easter week. The letter referred to the significance of Easter for Irish people due to 1916, and basically everybody pleaded for them not to send an Englishman over to hang this Irish man during Easter week. The government also stated again they questioned the mental health of Michael Manning, But medical advisors came in, they checked him out, and they seen that he was of sound of mind and that he had no issues or anything regards to mental health. So they disregarded that whole entire fact. This is the report which was stated. He has an average standard of education for his age and class. His behaviour has been quite normal due to his imprisonment, and he has taken part in social activities in prison. He is quite rational in speech and behaviour. He shows no evidence of depression or anxiety since his trial and appears to be taking his sentence in calm spirit. And on the 13th of April 1954, the government decided not to advise the President to grant reprieve for Manning. Taoiseach phoned the President immediately after the Cabinet meeting ended to inform him on the decision. Prison officials contacted the English hangman and arranged him to come over to Dublin. So on the morning of the 20th of April 1954, Michael Manning was led from his death cell to his 2-storey hang house. He had a thick rope wrapped around his neck, with the Englishman hand on the lever. He pushed the lever, which opened the trap door, which led Michael Manning to his death. He broke his neck, and it wasn't long after he was pronounced dead. And he was also the last man hung in Ireland. It's so, so sad. When the officials came, when he was put into the post-mortem, they said that he died of cardiac arrest due to the fracture of his vertebrae on his neck. There were still protesters outside protesting, hoping that they'll see leniency and not have him hung. They weren't long knowing once the guards came out and they left a note on the door outside the prison stating that he had died. It's so, so sad. This man, yes, he murdered a 65-year-old nurse as she was walking to work. She had done no harm to no one. In fact, she had done many great things. Looked after a lot of sick people, helped after the World War I over in England. She took care of every single patient that she had. This was a 25-year-old man that had a massive drink problem, had a 22-year-old wife of 14 months at the time. They lost a baby. She was pregnant again. She was due any moment. And that poor child's father was taken away. Yes, I don't agree with what he done to that woman, but I don't agree with him being hung. He shouldn't have been hung. He shouldn't have been put in that situation to be hung. He should have been given life. Even Katie Cooper's family tried their hardest to stop him being hung. Unfortunately, that's the Irish government for you. And it's just so messed up, because if you have a look at it now, they're so laxed. They are so laxed on charges now. I mean, they're backwards in ways. You'd get more time for dealing drugs than you would for being a paedophile. And I know that sounds sick, but it's an actual fact. We all know cases, and I mean, you just have to look into the Irish justice system. It makes no sense. But like I says, that is the story of Michael Manning, the last man to be hanged in Ireland. Thank you so much for tuning in again, and hopefully I'll see you next week. If you do like this video, please don't forget to subscribe. Bye.